Hello friends, welcome to Weapon Technologies. So today we are going to discuss about ViewBag and ViewData in MVC. So let's start. Before we proceed, let me give you a brief introduction that ViewBag and ViewData, both of them are used to send data from controller to a view, right? But not vice versa. So let's talk about first ViewBag. So ViewBag is a dynamic property and the same thing that it is used to send data from controller to a view, right? And the syntax for ViewBag is that ViewBag dot property name. Over here we can give any meaningful name, right? So it's dynamic in nature, and whatever data we want to assign it into ViewBag, we can assign it, right? So let's start before wasting any time. So let's create one simple project. I'm going to create one project. So we are going to discuss about ViewBack data app. So I'm naming it with the same name and adding the reference of MVC. So repeating the same step as we did in our previous videos, right? So let's wait for a couple of seconds. It will generate for us an MVC application structure for us. So it is performing some process in the background, so let's wait. Yeah, so now that is completed. So now let's add first of all controller to our application. So I'm going to add it and giving it a meaningful name. Let's name it home controller, right? And for this index action method, let's add a view for this action method by the same name index. So index view is also added successfully. Yeah. Now let's go back to our controller, and now let's start. We want to assign some data in our ViewBag. So for ViewBag, we need to write ViewBag dot, and over here we can give um, any meaningful name, right? So let's suppose we give it my property name, any name whatever you want, and over here we will be assigning the data. So let's say mm, this is Vipin living in India, right? Now save this file. Now let's go back to our its view, that is our index view. So go to view, and over here we can fetch the data of ViewBag over here. So as we know that this is a C sharp syntax. So for writing C sharp syntax on the view, I have already told you in my previous video, we need to start with at the rate, right? And then we can give this name ViewBag over here, right? That's it. And we are simply displaying the data over here. Let's save this file and now run this application. So it will load the application and let's see it is displaying data on the UI or not. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. Yes, application has been loaded. So it is going to load home controller and the index section method. So let's see it is displaying data or not. Yes, it is displaying. This is Vipin living in India, the same which we assign the data in our ViewBag, right? So this is how we can deal with the ViewBag. That was very simple. Now let me stop the application. Now let me show you with the help of models. Let's suppose we want to create any class and we will assign some data into that object, and that object we will be assigning to the ViewBag. So how we can do this? So let's do it. Yeah, and one more thing before we proceed, this view bag, as I told you, that it is dynamic in nature. So let's go to the definition. It's you will find here that you can see this is dynamic in nature, right? So that's why I was saying in my slide that it is dynamic, and we can give any meaningful name over here, right? So now let's create one model inside the model folder. So let's create one class. Let's give it a name employee, and in this class let's add some properties. So just to save our time, I have already added some properties. So in order to save the time, I'm just copy and pasting over here. So over here, we can see we have defined the four properties: ID, name, email, and age, right? So let's save this our model and let's go back to our home controller, right? And over here we can assign the data in a list of employee, right? So just to save the time, I have already written this. So let's give it, let's copy and paste, and we can see over here, yeah, list of employee. And before using a model on this controller, we need to give the reference of that model. So let's give it using, and then name of the application, and then models we want to use, right? Now we can use the our list of employees. So what we have done, we have simply defined the list of employee, and in that employee object we have assigned some dummy data, right? So let's save this, and now we will assign this object to our ViewBag. So how we can do this? ViewBag dot, let's give it any meaningful name. Let's suppose we can define to list, uh, to employee list, right? And over here we can assign this data in this ViewBag, right? That's it. And now this ViewBag dot to employee list we will be using over on our index page. So let's create one more div for that. So let's create, and since it is a, since it is a object, we are storing some data. So we need to define in a list. So let's define list, and over here we can write for each loop. Pressing tab two times, it will generate the snippet for us. And now this time the collection would be viewbag dot to employee list, right? And over here we can define in the list tag that, so to define, we have taken the property. So let's suppose at the weight item over here, remember one thing, that we will be not getting IntelliSense because it is dynamic, right? So item dot, it was ID, so we need to copy from our model, so that should be the same. So let's copy it and paste. Similarly, we can assign, next is our name, so we can give it item dot name, right? And similarly next was email, so we can give it at the weight item dot email. And the last one was age, so at the weight item dot age, right? So this is how we can fetch the data from our ViewBag to this list, right? So let's save this and run our application. So it will display data, this object data, this complete data on our UI. So let's see, it is loading. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. Yeah, we can see all the data has been rendered in the browser. ID, name, Vipin, Ram, Amit, Aditya, and accordingly whatever data we have assigned in our, in this employee object, right? So all the data has been displayed on our UI. So this is how we can deal with the models when we want to assign and when we want to assign data in our complex object or in any object, right? And we can pass in our view back, right? And how we can display it on our view, how we can fetch, this is the process, right? And now let me stop the application. Let me show you one more simple thing. Let's take one simple list, right? One simple list. Let's take one view bag. I have already taken. So to just save the time, let's define this. And over here, right? So what I have done, I have simply created one list of type string, and in that list, I am storing the string data, right? And that data I have assigned it to the view bag with the name my list. Any meaningful name we can give it here, right? So as of now I have taken my list, and now to display this data on the UI, so let's go to our index view. Let's create one more div block for this, right? And over here we can display, let's write for each loop, right? And the collection is now this time is viewback dot my list, right? And over here we can define our item, right, to display the item in that collection. Now let's run the application. Let's see, it will give the error on the page. So let's see why it is giving the error. So we'll tell you in a short. So we'll tell you in a little bit. So let's wait. Let's see what error it is giving on the UI. Oh, it is displaying. Okay, okay, that's fine. That will come with the view data when I will explain you view data. So it is fine with the view bag. So we are able to see the data. So just to make it just to make it look in a better way. So let's define it in a list. So we can do it by defining this, and we can place this our loop into this UL tag, and to display the item we can display it in our list tag, right? So let's place it in a list tag. Now save this file. Now let's run it. Now it will be space separated and it will look better. So let's see. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. Yeah, now we can see the list of string type, whatever we have stored in that list, all the data is displayed in a list manner, right? So this is how we can deal with the view bag, and how we can show the view bag on the view, and how we can fetch basically view bag data on the view, right? So this is the process. So let me stop the application, and now let's go to our controller, and now let's understand about the view data, our new concept. So let's go back to our slide for view data. That is basically it work as a dictionary, right? And that is also used for the same purpose for sending data from controller to the view, but not vice versa, right? But one important thing that we need to remember that view data basically it requires typecasting for complex data type, right? So whenever we want to fetch data from the view data on any view, right? So on that particular view, we need to typecast it into a same type, whatever data we have stored in the controller, right? When we have assigned the data in the view data, right? So let me show you. So let's go to the Visual Studio, so that will be more clear to you. For that, let's create one more index section method, or we can do it in the same, but let's create a new index section method, and let's delete this all, right? And let's name it, let's suppose display, and over here we are assigning some data into view data. So let's take it view data, and as I told you, it work as a dictionary. So we need to define the key name over here, and we can define any key name over here. So let's suppose we can take display details, right? And over here we can assign any data. Let's suppose we write India is a democratic country, right? right? And let's save this, and now let's copy it, and now we will fetch the data of this view data in our view. So let's suppose, yeah, for this display action method, we need to add one view also. So let's go and add a view for this display index action, for this display action method basically. So the same step, yeah. So we have already added the view for display action method also. And now in the step block, we will fetch our view data. So simply, we need to start with at the rate to write our C sharp syntax, right? So we simply display the data, view data, and the key name. So let's save this and run this application. And now this time it will load home controller and the display action method, right? You can see in the URL. So it will head to the home controller, and inside the home controller, it will head to the display action method. And on that display action method, we have created a display view for that particular action method. So let's wait. It will, yeah. So the data has been rendered in the browser, as you can see, and there's a democratic country, right? So this is how we can deal with the view data, right? So let me show you one more thing. Uh, so just copy this data, and we can assign it in the view data. So we have simply created a one new list of type string, right? And we are going to store in this view data this time, not view bag, right? So because we are now working with the view data, so let's give it a meaningful name. So let's give it list detail, right? And now this time this view data we are going to use on our display view, right? So for that, so let's create one more div block for that, right? And over here, let's define our list tag, and we will write our for each loop, and the collection would be this time our view data list details, right? And let's place this in our list tag at the rate item, right? So you can see it is giving this red line error on this below this text, right? Why it is giving? So let's save this file and let's run the application. Let's understand what error it is giving on the UI. So let me show you. So we'll tell you in a little bit the solution also why it is displaying. So let me close the previous tab. Yeah, so it is Yeah, so it is giving a compilation error. We can see it cannot operate on variable of type object because object doesn't contain a public definition for get enumerator. So when we are dealing with the view data, so as we can see that we have assigned the list in this view data, right? So in .NET, each and everything is treated as an object, right? So the data is stored in the object, and that object we are trying to fetch over here. So we can't do it directly. For that, we need to typecast it into a same type, right? So that's why it is giving an error. So let me stop the application and let me show you one thing. So to fetch data from view data, so in this data, what kind of data we have stored? We have stored of type string data, that is of list, right? So we have stored list that is of type string, right? So we need to typecast it in the same type over here to fetch data from this collection, right? So that's why we need to define list of type string over here, right? So now we have simply typecast it to be into the same type whatever we have stored, whatever the data we have stored into this view data list detail, right? So we have simply typecast it to the same list of string type, right? Now it will display the data. Now no compilation error will come this time. So let's wait and let's see what data it is giving. Now it will load the data properly. Yeah, so we can see our list has been shown. So it is working fine, right? the same data whatever we have stored in our this view data, the list of type string, right? So all this data is properly displayed on this UI, right? So that's why I mentioned the point that view data basically requires typecasting for complex data type, right? So in the view data, any object or any complex data type, whatever we are assigning in the view data, so at the time of fetching on any view, we need to typecast it into a same type to display the data, right? So that is why that error was coming. So this is how our ViewBag and ViewData basically work, right? And let me tell you one more thing. Let's go back to our slide. ViewData we have already discussed. So these are the differences you can see on the screen. ViewData is a dictionary of object that is derived from ViewData dictionary class and accessible using string as keys, right? And ViewBag is a dynamic property that takes advantage of the new dynamic feature that we have already discussed. And just now we have discussed for the view data that it requires typecasting for complex data type and check for the null value to avoid error. But in the case of ViewBag, it doesn't require any typecasting. It doesn't need any typecasting for a complex data type, right? And these are the basically various techniques for binding multiple model to a single view, right? So using dynamic model, view data, bag, tuple, and these. So that we will be discussing in our upcoming video. So don't worry about that. So that is all for today. So we have discussed about view bag and view data in this video. So please like and subscribe my channel, fans, so that you can get all the latest notification in the future. So that is all for today. So bye bye. Take care.